Hi, in this session, we shall just go through some very basic conceptual aspects related to the common study designs that we come across in epidemiology. Again, a note of caution, this is going to be just a brief overview, so I'm not going to go into the details of any of the designs. First, I would like to mention that when we classify epidemiological study designs, different literature sources, including different textbooks, classify them in different ways. So stick to any one classification based on any one standard textbook that you are referring to. Okay. However, what is important is that for every study, we ask whether the investigator is intervening to bring about any change in the outcome of the participants. If the answer is yes, then that's an experimental or an interventional study. For example, there could be two groups, and as an investigator, I am giving drug A to one and drug B to another. Okay, I am intervening to change the outcome of both the groups. So that makes it an experimental or an interventional study, right? The intervention could also be that one group receives no therapy while the other is encouraged to probably follow a certain exercise regimen. That could also be an interventional study. Basically, the investigator is intervening to bring about a change in the outcome. The other would be that the answer to this question is no, that the investigator is not intervening. Instead, the investigator is simply standing back, seeing, observing what happens to the participants. That is an observational study. In an observational study, then you ask, is the investigator having any certain hypothesis that she wants to test? Is there any cause-effect outcome that she wants to test? Is there any association that she wants to find? If the answer is no, then it's a descriptive study. That is, the investigator is simply going to describe what happens to the study participants, and there are various types of descriptive studies. If the answer is yes, that is, the investigator does want to say test some cause-effect relationship or test a hypothesis, then that becomes an analytical study. Some important types of analytical studies are case control study, cohort study, and cross-sectional studies can also be analytical studies. So now we'll discuss these three in some more detail. What is a cross-sectional study? It's important to understand that cross-sectional means only at one point in time. That is, you are going to take the measurement of the participant just once. You are not going to see what happens to the participant in the future or what happened to the participant in the past. You will just take one measurement. Whenever you are going to take a measurement of a person only once, that is a cross-sectional study, right? Now we come to a cohort study. So what is a cohort? It's basically a group of people who share some common characteristic, right? So a cohort study by nature is forward-looking. That is, we begin today with a group of people and we see what happens to them over a period of time. That is, we follow them up for some specified period of time, right? So it's a forward-looking or a prospective study. Now to go into some details of a cohort study, what it means is that we begin with two groups of people who have the exposure or the risk factor, right? So we begin with a group of people who has the risk factor and another group who does not have the risk factor. For example, we take two groups of people, one who smoke and others who don't smoke. Now we observe them for a specific period of time, say 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, and we see how many of these develop lung cancer and how many don't develop lung cancer, right? So we go from the exposure or the risk factor to the disease or the outcome. What's important to remember here is that the risk factor, the exposure can be a risk factor or could be a protective factor, right? So protective would be, for example, we take a group of people who don't exercise at all and those who do exercise every day, say for 30 minutes. We'll have to define every thing very specifically, what we mean by exercise, what is the intensity, for how much duration. So those are the things that actually make a cohort study difficult, because you don't know if those who don't exercise today may start exercising 1 year from now. Those who do exercise today may not exercise after a year, right? So these are things which make any cohort study difficult, but I'll put that aside for now. Basically, we begin with a group of people who do exercise and those who don't exercise, and we see how many of them develop a cardiac condition, a cardiac disease, say 10 years from now, and how many don't develop. So in this case, we are looking if exercise is protective or not. In case of smoking, we were looking if smoking is a risk factor for lung cancer or not, right? We'll come to the pen and paper aspects of this in a while. First, now let me come to a case control study. Here again, I would like to take the example of lung cancer and smoking only, because this is where students tend to get most confused. In a case control study, what I'm doing is I'm taking cases and controls. What are cases? Cases are people who do have the disease. That is, I take people who have lung cancer, they are cases, and I take people who don't have lung cancer, they are controls. Now, I ask them, that is, I go back in time, I ask them if they were smoking or they were not smoking, or I maybe check their medical reports. Basically, I go back in past to find out their history. Were they smoking? Were they not smoking? Right? What is the risk factor that I'm looking at? Smoking in this case. So I ask about smoking. I can ask about other risk factors also. That is one of the advantages of case control, that I can study multiple exposures, because I just have to go to a person and ask whether he was smoking or not, right? One disadvantage here is that of recall. Somebody who has lung cancer will recall very well when he started smoking. Somebody who doesn't have lung cancer will probably not be able to tell you might not be able to tell you very accurately when he started smoking or not. So these are advantages, disadvantages of both type of studies that have been given very well in your textbook. So please go through that. So basically, you go back in time and ask whether the risk factor or the exposure was present or not. So you begin with the disease, present or not, and you go back in time to find out if the risk factor was present or not. In cohort, you began with the risk factor of the exposure, and you went forward and saw if the disease happened or not. So that's the difference between cohort and case control. However, I used the same example for both the studies to emphasize the fact that in several cases, you can actually use either of the two types of studies, right? If you want to study if there is any association between lung cancer and smoking, you can do either a prospective study, begin with smokers, non-smokers, and see if they have lung cancer or not, or you begin with lung cancer and healthy people and you ask if they were smokers or not. The important part is that you should be able to justify your choice of study, why you have taken that study, and you describe the study properly with its advantages and disadvantages. So very often students ask me if a certain study design is right or wrong. So the only thing I tell them is you need to justify your choice and you need to write the pros and cons of any design that you have chosen, and then you describe the study properly. In most cases, you can choose more than one study design for a given situation. So that was important for you to understand. Now we'll go into the technicalities or the pen and paper, the calculations that are associated with these two major study designs. So now we go forward to that. So in both cohort studies as well as in case control studies, the 2x2 table that we form is very similar. So we'll begin with that. So here we always first write the exposure or the risk factor, right? We all know that an exposure or a risk factor always occurs first and then it leads to the disease. So this is how it's easy for us to remember or understand when we draw this table, that the risk factor and the exposure is what we write here and the disease is what we write here. Now we prepare this table, right? So here we have disease present, here we have disease absent. Here the exposure is present or the risk factor is present and the exposure is absent or the risk factor is not present. We label these cells as A, B, C and D. Here we will have the totals, that is A plus B, C plus D, A plus C and B plus D. So this is how the table will look, and here we will have the grand total. Right? What's important to understand is that when we do a cohort study, we are beginning over here. That is, we are taking all those people who have the exposure or who have the risk factor. That is, we are taking all those people who smoke and we are taking all those people who don't smoke. So these are the numbers that we begin with in the cohort study. We know the number of people who smoke right from the beginning. We know the number of people who smoke and we know the number of people who don't smoke, right? Now over a period of time, the specified time, we are going to see how many of them develop lung cancer and how many don't develop lung cancer. So only when the study ends will we get the number of people who have lung cancer and the number of people who don't have lung cancer. So it's very important to remember that in a cohort study, these are the numbers that we begin with, right? Now we know what incidence is. Incidence is those who develop the disease, that is new cases within a given period of time, right? So in a cohort study, here we are beginning only with smokers and non-smokers, and over say 10 years, we are seeing how many people develop lung cancer, that is the new cases of lung cancer, and those who do not develop lung cancer, right? So we are going to have incident cases, right? So we are going to have incidence in exposed and we are going to have incidence in non-exposed. What is that going to be? Incidence in exposed will be those who were smoking, those who were exposed, that is incidence in exposed. So who were exposed? So A plus B. That is the number we begin with. So that is the denominator. And how many develop lung cancer? A, right? Incidence in non-exposed. How many were not smoking? C plus D. How many of those develop lung cancer? C, right? So this is something that is important in cohort. Now we'll study the other parameters here, but first I want to explain something related to this table in case control. So now in case control, this is where we begin with. So in cohort, the direction was exposure to disease, forward looking, right? Now in case control studies, we begin with cases and controls. So this people who have the disease are the cases, people who don't have the disease are the controls. So here, these are the numbers that we begin with. We know the people who have the disease, we know the people who don't have the disease. Now we are going back in time and we are asking, so this is case control and this is cohort. Here we are beginning with the disease and we are going back in time and we are asking them, did you smoke or did you not smoke, right? So here we are not going to find out whether over a period of 5 years somebody develops smoking or not. We are not going to know incident cases. That is important to understand. Incidences, people who develop new cases over a period of time. So here we know that these were the smokers, these were the non-smokers. So these were the people who developed lung cancer. But here we are already beginning with lung cancer and absence of lung cancer. We are just going back and asking if they were smoking or they were not smoking. So these were the people who have lung cancer and were smoking. These are the people who weren't smoking. These are the people who did not have lung cancer and still they were the ones who were smoking, and these are the ones who were not smoking, right? So if there is any difficulty that you face in remembering, just remember the table will always look like this. Exposure and risk factor here and disease over here, right? So in case control, it is disease to exposure or risk factor. So it's a backward facing study, a retrospective study. Whereas in case control, it is exposure to disease. We are beginning with exposure and we are asking if disease is there or not. So it's a forward facing case control cohort study, sorry. And in both the cases, we have used the same example, that of lung cancer and smoking. Hence, to emphasize that in most situations, you can use either of the study designs based on the resources you have, the time you have, and the risk-benefit ratio, the advantages and the disadvantages of both. You take a call, but for your exam per se, you can choose a design which you think is all right, and you simply justify it. Now coming to what we can calculate in these two study designs, right? So here, as I said, in a cohort study, we have the incidence in exposed, those who smoked and developed lung cancer, incidence in non-exposed, those who did not smoke and developed lung cancer. Relative risk is incidence of exposed upon incidence of non-exposed. Okay. So this ratio is the relative risk. How do you write it? Suppose I get a relative risk of, for example, 2. What would it mean? It would mean if I get a relative risk of 2, it would mean those who smoke, see where my pen goes. Those who smoke, I begin from the exposure. Those who smoke are 2 times more likely to get lung cancer than those who don't smoke. So your statement should go from exposure to disease. Those who smoke are 2 times more likely. Those who smoke, that is those who have the risk factor, are 2 times more likely to get the disease, that is lung cancer, than those who don't smoke. Right? Now coming to the 2 other important terminologies in a cohort study, that is attributable risk and population attributable risk. What does attributable risk mean? The concept says that out of the entire population, right, A plus B plus C plus D, this is all the people, and just for ease of understanding we say that the 2 groups are equal, right? That is, out of the whole sample that we have selected, half of the people smoke and half of the people don't smoke. They are non-exposed, these are exposed. So out of those who are exposed to smoking, how many develop lung cancer? Say these many. Okay, so that will be incidence in exposed. Out of those who don't smoke, still how many develop lung cancer? So it would be this much, right? What the concept says is that out of, considering that both these groups are equal in number, you just subtract this lower portion from this whole upper portion, right? So incidence of the disease in those who are exposed minus incidence of the disease in those who are non-exposed, which will leave you only with this much area, right? So this is the risk of the disease which is attributable to this exposure, because even if one was not exposed, still there is this much chance that the person would still get the disease. So what is the risk? What is the portion of the risk which is attributable to the exposure? Only this much. How is it said in terms of a formula? It is incidence of risk in the exposed, that is this whole, this shaded area. This is the exposed. So incidence of the disease in the exposed minus incidence of the disease in the non-exposed. Okay, divided by incidence of the disease in the exposed, that is the whole denominator, into 100. Now coming to the concept of population attributable risk. To understand this concept, the formula is already given in the textbook. So let's try to understand the concept a little bit. We assume that these are 2 same populations, okay? Forget this population that we were talking about. Forget the table for right now, okay? Concentrate on this. This entire circle, the 2 circles, both of it represent the population of Anand city, okay? Now suppose from this whole Anand city, these many people smoke, okay? This top cap that I have drawn over here, okay? From Anand city, these are the people who are exposed to alcohol consumption, okay? These many people. So this area is left out, they are non-exposed. The entire, almost more than half of the circle, that is almost more than half of the people drink alcohol, okay? Now we want to see the association between smoking and gastric carcinoma and alcohol and gastric carcinoma, right? So what we'll see here is that out of those who smoke, almost 90% develop gastric carcinoma. Whereas out of those who drink alcohol, only 45%, that is only half of this, okay? Out of those who smoke, 90% develop gastric carcinoma. Whereas out of those who drink alcohol, only half, that is just 45 to 50% develop gastric carcinoma. But as you can see visibly, there are more number of people who develop gastric carcinoma because of alcohol than who develop gastric carcinoma because of smoking, because the number of people who drink alcohol is more than the number of people who smoke. So the population attributable risk of alcohol for gastric carcinoma is more than of smoking for gastric carcinoma. So if as a public health authority, if I want to work on curbing either smoking or alcohol, I might have to choose alcohol than smoking. So this is how public health policies are framed, because we would never have the resources for curbing the two, right? For any other example. So there is always a choice that we have to make, and the choice we make is the risk factor, even though only 50%, suppose relative risk may be only 50%, that out of those who incidence of gastric carcinoma in smokers and non-smokers. So maybe those who, forget that, for alcohol, though only 50% of those who drink alcohol get gastric carcinoma, and though 90% of those who smoke get gastric carcinoma, I'll still choose to curb alcoholism, because more number of gastric carcinomas can be stopped if I stop alcoholism than if I stop smoking in the community. Okay, so the formula for that is incidence of the disease in the whole of the population. Okay, so coming to this figure that I drew over here, incidence of the disease in the whole of the population. So this plus this minus incidence of the disease in those who are not exposed. So we remove this part, okay, divided by incidence in the whole of population. So basically for the whole population, if I remove this incidence of population in those who are not exposed, so basically from the whole population, if I remove smoking, then this much of lung cancer can be stopped, because this will stay, even because these are not smoking, still they are getting lung cancer, right? So even if I remove this much, this is the part which probably will be decreased because of removal of or by curbing smoking. Okay, so this is the formula for that, and you can remember this figure to understand the concept. Coming to case control studies and some of their basic calculations, we first begin with exposure rates, which are pretty straightforward. So in cohort studies, recall what we calculated, relative risk. How we did that was, out of those who were exposed, who developed the disease, out of those who are not exposed, who developed the disease. So we begin with what we know right at the beginning of the study. In cohort study, we know who the smokers are and who the non-smokers are, and we use those numbers as denominators. In case control, here we know who has lung cancer and who doesn't have lung cancer. So we begin with those as denominators. Out of those who have lung cancer, A plus C, who are the ones who smoked? A. Okay. Out of those who don't have lung cancer, that is B plus D. That is what we begin with, right? In a case control study, we know who doesn't have lung cancer. So out of those who don't have lung cancer, who still gave the history of smoking? B. So B upon D. So that is pretty straightforward. We now come to the important concept of odds ratio in a case control study. The term odds ratio seems pretty simple. It says the ratio of odds. But what do we mean when we say odds? The odds of something happening, right? Or the probability of something happening. Do you think both the terms mean the same? Probability and odds? Actually, they are different. So what is the difference? We'll try to explain. So we come to the note over here. When we say the probability of X, it means the probability, when we say the probability of X, we basically mean that the number of times we get the favorable outcome divided by the total number of outcomes possible. Now let me just simplify this. When I take a dice and I roll it, what are the total possible outcomes? 6, right? Because a dice has 6 faces with numbers 1 to 6. So the total possible outcomes are 6. Now what is the probability that we'll get the number 2, right? So only there is just one favorable outcome. Only one face has the number 2. So only one favorable outcome. So the probability of getting 2 when I roll a dice is 1 by 6. However, what are the odds of getting the number 2, right? Odds of getting the number 2 is the probability of getting number 2 divided by the probability of not getting number 2. Okay. So the probability of an event is number of times the favorable outcome can occur divided by the total outcomes possible. The odds of an event is the probability of an event happening upon the probability of the event not happening, which in this case would be probability of getting the number 2 is 1 by 6. Probability of not getting 2 is, if you get any other number but 2, then it's the probability of not getting 2. There are 5 possible outcomes, right? Except for 2, all other numbers. So 5 divided by 6. The 6 and 6 cancels itself out. So we get 1 by 5. So the probability of getting 2 on rolling a dice is 1 by 6. But the odds of getting 2 is 1 by 5. Now that this is clear, let us try to understand the odds ratio. So the ratio of odds of what? Okay. So the odds ratio is actually talking about odds of a case. Okay. Come to this table. Odds of a case having the exposure. Odds of a case having exposure. Odds of case having exposure or risk factor upon odds of a control. Odds of a control having the risk factor. Okay. So what does this mean? What are the odds of the case having the risk factor? So let us write it in terms of probability. Don't get scared if the equation gets a little big. It comes down to something very simple which is easy to remember. I'm just trying to explain how we get to that simple formula. Okay. So the odds of getting of a case having a risk factor would be probability of a case having a risk factor divided by probability of a case not having the risk factor. Okay. Upon odds of a control having the risk factor would be probability of a control having risk factor divided by probability of the controls not having risk factor. Okay. So what would that be? What is the probability of a case having a risk factor? Probability of a case. Okay. So we know the denominator. Probability of a case having a risk factor divided by probability of a case not having the risk factor. So C. Okay. The whole divided by probability of a control. Look at how I am writing the denominator first for ease of explanation. Probability of a control having the risk factor divided by probability of the control not having the risk factor. Okay. So as you can see, the denominators will get cut. What do we get is A upon C divided by B upon D. What is that? A upon C into D upon B. What is that? AD upon BC, which is the cross product. AD upon BC. So we know that the odds ratio is the cross product of AD upon BC, and this is how we derive it. So when in your exams you don't have time to calculate, of course you don't have to go through any of these derivations. You simply use AD upon BC to get the odds ratio. Now coming to the last important aspect is how do we report this odds ratio, right? So how did we report relative risk here? So that is what we have written over here. Okay. We have written, we begin with, I said that when we write, we have to write from what we began with to what we received. So here we wrote that when we have a relative risk of 2, we say that those who smoke, that is from the risk factor, those who have risk factor are 2 times more likely to get the disease than those who don't have the risk factor, right? Now in a case control study, we begin with the cases and controls, we begin with the disease, right? So that's how we write it. If we have an odds ratio of 3, we write that odds of a case, okay, odds of a case being a smoker, odds of a case being a smoker are 3 times the odds of a control, are 3 times the odds of a control being a smoker. Okay, so the odds of a person having the disease being exposed are 3 times the odds of a non-diseased person being exposed. Okay, so when we write for case control, we begin from this place and go to this place. We begin from disease and go to risk factor. When we are doing a case control study and are reporting relative risk, we begin with the exposure and go towards the disease even while reporting. I think this is enough for this session and I hope this helps. Thank you very much.